Hi everyone. As you can see, I've got everything ready now to start sowing my seeds for next year and some for later this year. I showed you on the last video collecting the seeds from the garden, and here they all are in the little envelopes, hopefully all marked with the right names on them: foxgloves, poppies, aquilegias, nasturtiums. So basically it's the same for whatever seed you sow, whether you sow it in a seed tray or individual modules like this. These are easier for sowing thicker seeds or larger seeds, and these then and the tray for scattering finer seed. So what I do with all the seeds I collect, I did show you the lupins. This is the final stage of the lupins, where I have now cut it. These are all drying, and as you see, they're going black, so they will dry out and the seeds will ripen. And I've got one here which I did earlier on, and as you can see, these are the seeds that have come out of this pod here. So if I peel that back, you will see that there's some seeds just inside there. They begin to curl as they dry, so you can tell they're ripe because the seeds begin to fall out. So we've got a few seeds out of them. You might get 6 or 8 or 10 of them. So those are the size of the seeds, and these are lupins, my blue lupins. Because they're large seeds, you can actually place them where you want them in the tray. And I normally put 2 seeds in, one in each corner, so that you can get a lot more in them. And if they don't all germinate, then you've obviously got you haven't used up too much space. The way they tell you to cover them with a fine layer of soil or compost or vermiculite. What I generally do, in a way of having some idea of how deep they should be, is roughly the same depth that the seed is. So that's quite thick. So I'll push them in a little bit there, and then I just cover them over like that. And I do that with as many as I want, push them in gently, and then you've got your seeds which should germinate probably in about 3 to 4 weeks, hopefully, and they're all covered there. Because I don't always sow the whole tray of seeds, the same seed, I sometimes mix them. So that tray now I can use Honesty, and these are the Honesty seeds we collected earlier on, and as you can see, they're quite large seeds there, so you can actually place those again to a tray or to a little module there like that, and then you can either take away one if you don't want them, and then you can save the others for later on. So again, push them slightly under like that, because they're larger seeds. Just cover them over. I won't sow all these seeds because you can actually sprinkle these in the garden, and they do very well. If you just sprinkle them now, they'll be up by the autumn time, and you'll have plants for next year. Obviously you have to mark each one. I'm not very good at marking, but what I do, I use the lollipop sticks from any lollipop that you have or your children have, and then just write on the label. I'll just mark the lupins there because they're the first ones. So lupins, and I put the date. Today's date is probably the 8th or 9th, I'm not sure, so I put down the 8th of the 7th, 20, and then I'll just put that in there, and I know hopefully that those 3 are lupins. I'll do the same then with the Honesty seeds. So those are one lot out of the way, and the Honesty, I showed you how they grow. These are the seeds that we collected. We just cut them off the plant, and they've just about all finished now. Now, as you can see, the seeds are just inside there. You see the little seeds inside, and if you peel them like I showed you there, just strip them. And years ago these used to be used as dry decorations for flower displays in the winter time, and they're completely brown inside. So just by peeling a layer off like that, you've got your seeds, which I'll take out from that side and put them in there because I don't need them. And you do the same thing the other side. You just peel the other side off, and then you end up then with these silvery bits on either side. If you leave them in the garden, they will do that anyway, so you'll have some silvery display for a couple of weeks during the winter time. So those are the seeds for that. If you have very fine seeds like foxgloves, you've got foxgloves here, they are very fine, and also the poppy seeds. And as you can see, they are really, I tip them out onto my hand, but they're very fine seeds, and you wouldn't need to have more than that because obviously there's probably hundreds of seeds there. So with these, I would sprinkle them on the top of the compost here, and then just very, very lightly like that, over there. And because they're very fine seeds, then you can either use a mixture of vermiculite and soil, or just vermiculite or perlite, or even compost, but you would do a very, very thin layer over the top of them like that. Sometimes, because the seeds are so fine, I do what they might do in the garden. I literally just gently rub them in like that, smooth them over, pat them down, and hopefully that would be sufficient. They will grow. You keep all of these in a cool place. You don't put them in the greenhouse. Sheltered spot in the garden, and within a few weeks they will grow. So you'll do this with most biennial plants that are ready for next year, and they grow this year and flower next year. So that could be things like, honestly, there's feverfew. You can either sow them in pots, and what I've done is some of these are plants I grew planted last year. That's feverfew, and this is a double one, and you can tell by the leaves there, which are very finely cut. But they see themselves in the garden, but if you specifically want to plant them in a particular place, sow them now when they start going to seed, and then you've got them for next year. You can sprinkle them in the garden. There's another one here called Lichness, and it grows about 3 foot tall, and it has little cerise pink or white flowers on it. These were sown last autumn, and as you can see, they're quite decent plants. You grow them in the autumn, then plant them up in the spring into individual pots. So again, they should flower maybe later this year or possibly next year. And then a few of this one here, again, which is a biennial, which is called a Catenacci, which is Cupid's dart. And I sowed these late last summer, planted them up early spring into bigger pots, and they are ready to go into the garden. Now they are a perennial, but they won't see themselves in the garden. And for next year, if you want to plant seeds for next year, some of them not very, the hardy ones you can plant and they'll be fine. These were some of the Aquilegias that I planted, but I actually planted them this year in February, and as you can see, they've made decent plants. Planted them in individual sections in there, and they can be planted out now. They will flower next year. Lupins, same time last year, I sowed these lupins, and as you can see, it's a decent sized plant, but with lupins you have to keep them in somewhere sheltered for the winter time and protected from the slugs. So because obviously they die right down, you would protect them then for next year. So those will be planted out later on. Cuttings which were taken now, but they were taken this time last year. Fuchsias, and I have shown you before about taking the fuchsia cuttings. And usually it's a non-flowering shoot there, which you take, and you count 1, 2, the third leaf down there, and you just snip it off there. Then you've got 2 sections of leaves there. You can, if you've got a longer length, you can have an extra pair of leaves on there. But take these 2 side bits off here, like that. And then you would cut under the leaf joint there, like that. And then take 1 leaf off, plant it in a pot. It needs to be a little bit bigger than that, but you plant it in 4 or 5 in a pot around the edge, cover it with a polythene bag and keep it in a shady spot. And this is what I did last year with that one, and as you can see, it's a decent plant now, quite nice flower blooms on it, and this was potted up probably about a month ago. So it was grown from a little piece last year. So those again are cuttings you can take from now and do for next year. We also have some of the salvias. Again, these were not 100% hardy, so I took a cutting last year, and again, very similar. There's a side shoot there, so what I'll do, that one there, I shall cut it down to the next set of leaves there, under there. So you see I've got a bare bit of stem, and then I've got two leaves there. Then I cut them literally under the leaves, just pull those bits off there. Again, take the upper leaves off, and again, put that into a pot. You can put different cuttings in the same pot. They don't all have to be the same plant. So you can put them in the same pot. But again, this is a cutting that was taken last year, and as you can see, it's grown really well. And that one's called Amistad. And then there's another one there, which is red. Again, overwintered in the greenhouse and planted up this spring, and you can see the size they are now. And that one's called Neon. So that's some of those cuttings you can take there. I'll put that in there for now so it doesn't dry out. And then we had the Hydrangea cuttings, which I took last year. These I did show you earlier about taking Hydrangea cuttings. This one, I'm not going to take it from this, but this one only has one non-flowering shoot on it. But if I wanted to take it from there, I would cut it below the leaf joint there, and then I would take the lower leaves off, plant that again in a pot, half a dozen of them, polythene bag over them in a shady place for this summer, and they will then overwinter if you protect them. And this was last year's cutting from the white ones that I did last year. And again, we had that one. It just shows how much they grow in one season. So this has flowered, which is unusual for the first year we've taken the cuttings, but that's 1 year's growth. And then we also have this one here, which was last year's cutting of a fuchsia again, but this was the hardy, one of the hardy fuchsias, exactly the same as all the other fuchsias. You count about 1, 2, 3 leaves down, or 3 sets of leaves, cut underneath it, and then do the same. I can do it. It says non-flowering, but these, it's very difficult to find non-flowering shoots. So just peel off the bottom bits there, take the flowers off. Sounds a bit hard, but if you do it that way, you're fine. Pinch the little tip out there, and you've got, that's your cutting again, and you can place them in a circle around a pot. And they work out much better that way. One of the questions I was asked about dahlias, can you grow them from seed? And if I move some of these away, you'll be able to see those there. These were sown, they're the dwarf dahlias. I sowed these in March of this year, and as you can see, because they're larger seeds, I put them into individual pots, cells. They're now ready to be planted out in the garden, and hopefully they will flower this year. But they will make little tubers underneath, but you will have to take them in for the winter and protect them. So hopefully this will give you some idea of how to sow your seeds and to collect. And any plant that is a biennial, which means that you planted this year, flowers next year, you can plant now. There's wallflowers, there's foxgloves, wallflowers, sweet rocket, hesperus. They're all hardy plants which can be sown in the garden.